Welcome back to the deep dive. It's really good to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, so today we are tackling a subject that is, frankly, it's a bit of a biological riddle. We're looking at a stack of research that explores a mystery that has plagued relationships, confused teenagers, and surprisingly, driven the evolution of the human species in ways I certainly had not considered before reading through all this material.
It is a fascinating topic. Usually when we talk about evolutionary biology, we are talking about survival of the fittest in the
Yeah.
sense of, who has the sharpest teeth or who can run the fastest.
Right.
We think about camouflage, armor, that sort of thing. But today, we're looking at the evolutionary divergence between male and female anatomy, specifically regarding visibility and accessibility.
Right, right. We're pivoting from survival to satisfaction, basically. And to kick this off, I want to start with a very simple and honestly somewhat hilarious observation from our source material. The author points out this fundamental truth about male psychology and anatomy. He notes that in the history of clinical therapy, and we are talking about the entire history of the field here, no man has ever walked into a sex therapist's office, sat down on the couch, and said, Doc, I have a massive problem. I've never had an orgasm, and to be honest, I don't even know where my penis is.
Yeah, it's a scenario that just doesn't happen. It is biologically implausible.
Exactly. It's absurd. The male apparatus is just, it's there, it's visible, it's incredibly straightforward. It is strictly what you see is what you get. But then you look at the female experience, and the source makes this incredible comparison. It compares the clitoris to the Loch Ness Monster.
Which is a very vivid, if slightly depressing, image.
Isn't it? But if you think about it, the source says there are legends about it. There are, fuzzy photographs circulating in dark corners of the internet. There are a few dedicated spelunkers who claim to have glimpsed it in the wild. But for a lot of people, specifically a very large portion of the male population, basically, you just got to have faith that it's there.
And while that is a humorous way to frame it, it points to a very real, very significant biological discrepancy. If reproduction is the ultimate goal of evolution,
Which it is.
right, and if pleasure is the mechanism nature uses to encourage reproduction, essentially the bribe nature pays us to pass on our genes.
I love that phrase, the bribe.
Yeah. But why is the female pleasure center so well hidden? Why is the male orgasm almost guaranteed, like a participation trophy?
Free participation trophy, yeah.
While the female orgasm is often described in our source as trying to attain nirvana.
It feels like a design flaw, doesn't it? Or at least some kind of cosmic prank. The source asks this brilliant question. Why does Mother Nature make it so incredibly difficult to please women? If the goal is making babies, shouldn't the start button be big, red, and right on the dashboard?
That is the exact core question we are unpacking today.
Right.
We aren't just looking at this as a complaint about anatomy or a standard men are from Mars, women are from Venus routine.
Right.
We want to understand the actual biological function of the hidden clitoris. Because in evolutionary biology, things rarely happen by accident.
No, there's always a reason.
Exactly. If something is difficult or hidden or exceptionally complex, there's almost always a specific selection pressure that made it that way over millions of years.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to figure out why the map to female pleasure looks like a treasure hunt designed by a sadist, while the map to male pleasure looks like a giant neon sign on the Las Vegas Strip.
Precisely. We need to find the logic in the labyrinth.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting with segment 1, which we can call the visibility paradox. Our source starts by zooming way out to the animal kingdom, specifically African predators. And it turns out humans are the odd ones out here. We're doing something very, very strange.
We really are. If you look at most animals, especially those in the wild, out on the African savanna, hiding your genitals is standard operating procedure. It's just a basic survival strategy.
Right. The source mentions that most African predators, lions, leopards, wild dogs, they have penises and testes that are tiny and completely tucked away. They're hidden beneath the animal or tucked in the back. And the logic is pretty brutal when you really think about it.
Well, it's basic risk management.
Yeah.
You do not want your most valuable genetic assets, the very things that allow your lineage to continue into the next generation, in a place where they can be bitten off during a fight or snagged on a thorn bush while you're hunting.
Exactly. It's about protection. Nature usually prioritizes the absolute safety of reproductive organs. You protect the crown jewels, but then you look at Homo sapiens. We stood upright, and suddenly everything changed.
We stood up, and the male anatomy did not stay tucked away. It didn't retract into the body like you might expect for protection. The source describes the human penis as extravagantly visible.
Extravagantly visible.
It's right there, front and center. It even has a tuft of hair basically drawing a circle around it, saying, look here, X marks the spot.
And consider the vulnerability of that. The source points out that this exposure is at the exact height of a hyena's teeth.
Which is a terrifying mental image.
It really is. I mean, imagine you're an early human on the plains. You're running from a predator. A hyena running by sees the most sensitive part of the male body just waving in the wind. The source says it practically screams, "Nigh, nigh, predators, fight this!"
So from a pure survival standpoint, this makes zero sense. It's a massive liability. It's a dinner bell for predators. But from an evolutionary standpoint, we have to ask the question, why take the risk? Why evolve to be so dangerously exposed? Why didn't we evolve to be like Ken, dull, smooth, and protected right up until the exact moment of intimacy?
It reminds me of the peacock, right? That's the classic example of quote-unquote unhelpful evolution.
That is the perfect analogy. The peacock's tail is a complete disaster for survival. It's incredibly heavy, it makes it hard to fly, it drags on the ground, and it is a bright blue and green beacon for tigers and other predators.
Yeah.
But it exists because peahens, the females, prefer it. It is the direct result of sexual selection, specifically female choice.
So the logic for the peacock is basically, I might get eaten by a tiger today, but at least the ladies like the tail.
Essentially, yes. If the female likes it, the male evolves it, even if it makes his day-to-day survival significantly harder. It's called the handicap principle. It suggests that the tail proves his genetic quality. He's effectively saying to the female, look at me, I am so strong and fit that I can survive despite lugging around this ridiculous, heavy, bright tail.
Okay, so let's apply that to humans. Men are walking around with this exposed anatomy not because it's practical for outrunning a hyena, but because ancient women like the look of it.
Yes. Women's preferences sculpted the visibility of the penis, just as the peahen sculpted the peacock's tail. Whatever the female enjoys or notices in a mate gets amplified over generations.
That makes sense.
If visibility signaled something attractive to females, perhaps maturity, perhaps virility, perhaps just confidence, then visibility is what got passed down, completely disregarding the risk of the hyena bite.
Okay, so that explains the male side of the equation. We are billboards. We are advertising. But this brings us right back to the frustration in our source material, because the author asks, if men evolved visible parts to please women, why didn't women's parts evolve to be visible to help men?
It is a totally valid question of biological asymmetry. Evolution seems to have pulled the two sexes in completely opposite directions here.
The narrator is pretty funny about this part. He says, I like giving women orgasms. When I'm trying to get a woman to like me, I don't want an Easter egg hunt. Why can't anything ever be simple?
And that frustration is the launch pad for understanding the different biological imperatives at play. Men are designed for display and very easy access. Women are designed for concealment and extreme complexity. And as we get into the anatomy, specifically the geography of it, you realize just how deep this scavenger hunt design actually goes.
Oh man, the geography is wild. This brings us to segment 2, the scavenger hunt. The source dives into the actual physical difficulty of finding these hidden landmarks, specifically focusing on the G-spot. And it starts with a little dig at how men and women navigate the world differently.
Right, the cognitive map theory. This is always a somewhat contentious topic in psychology, but the source uses it to set up a really effective analogy.
Yeah, the claim is that men generally think in abstract maps, north, south, east, west, like go north for 5 miles, then head east. But women tend to navigate by landmarks, turn left at the Starbucks, then right at the big oak tree. But then the source flips this concept and gives us the manhole analogy to explain just how rigorous the male task is in the bedroom.
Let's walk through that analogy for you listening, because it really highlights the tactile challenge. It forces the men listening to truly visualize the scale of the problem.
Okay, so imagine you are a man. Your task, according to the source, is to find a specific object. But the catch is you have to do it entirely by feel. You cannot use your eyes. And this object is located just under the lid of a manhole cover.
Difficult start right there.
Yeah.
Manhole covers are heavy, and they're usually out in the street.
Oh, it gets worse. That manhole cover is located above the Lincoln Tunnel. So you have to find the lid in the middle of raging New York traffic. Then you have to somehow crawl into this dark underground cavern. And then you have to find another entirely invisible spot hidden somewhere on the roof of that cavern.
That is an absolute labyrinth. And you are doing all of this in the dark, effectively.
Right. And what is the female task in this analogy? What is she looking for?
Finding the Empire State Building.
Exactly. It's massive. It is brightly lit up at night. You literally cannot miss it. You can see it from New Jersey. The source says, I think it's fair to say this race is rigged.
It certainly highlights the massive disparity in the effort required. One is a blind, tactile search in a dark tunnel while dodging traffic. The other is spotting a 102-story skyscraper.
And then we get to the G-spot itself. I love that the source points out it's named after a man, Dr. Grafenberg. He calls him the Columbus of subterranean exploration.
Which is very fitting, given the level of exploration required to document it. But the source actually provides a guide here, which is surprisingly rare for these types of evolutionary discussions. It breaks down the location with almost military precision.
It really does. And we should probably share the source's explicit disclaimer here. The author writes, if you are under 18, please skip the preceding paragraph. But since we are all adults here diving into the science, let's unpack the coordinates, because a lot of people out there genuinely still think the G-spot is a myth, like Atlantis.
It is definitively not a myth. It is an anatomical fact. The source states it is located about 3 inches in and straight up.
Straight up, meaning on the anterior wall, the front wall toward the belly button if the woman is lying on her back. And the description of the texture is, well, it's memorable. The source says when it's aroused, it feels like a spongy walnut.
Yes. And anatomically speaking, the source notes this is analogous to the prostate gland in males. So biologically, the structures are quite similar. It's highly sensitive glandular tissue, but the location is the key variable here. In men, the prostate is buried deep, mostly accessed internally or indirectly. In women, this analogous tissue is also internal, requiring very specific, targeted stimulation to reach.
And the positioning advice. The source gets incredibly specific here. It suggests that for a G-spot orgasm during intercourse, the woman should ideally be on top, leaning way, way back with her hands behind her heels. It sounds like an advanced yoga pose.
It does, but it emphasizes the precise geometry required. You have to align everything perfectly to hit a target that is hidden, internal, and highly specific. It is not something that generally happens by accident. You do not just stumble upon the G-spot while doing standard missionary work, usually. It requires intention.
Which brings us right back to the big why. If female pleasure is so vitally important for pair bonding and ultimately pregnancy, which we absolutely know it is, why make it so hard? Why didn't nature just make it glaringly obvious? This leads us perfectly into segment 3, nature's missed opportunity.
Ah, yes. The fluorescent green hypothesis.
I genuinely love this part of the text. The host basically brainstorms how nature could have designed women if the goal was just to make things easy. If pure, frictionless efficiency was the only metric that mattered.
Right. If the goal was simply to get the sperm to the egg with 0 friction and maximum success rate, the female design would look entirely different.
He suggests the stick theory. He asks the reader, why not put the female pleasure button on the end of a long flesh stick that pokes out proudly for all to see?
Which, as he immediately realizes in the text, would essentially be a penis.
Right. He says, okay, scratch that idea. That would look weird. But then he looks at color instead of structure. He points out that male animals across the globe are often incredibly colorful just to attract attention.
Indeed they are. The source mentions the mandrill as a prime example.
The mandrill is quite a sight. If you've ever been to a zoo, you know exactly who this guy is. He's got a bright red penis, a yellow tip, and a lilac-colored scrotum. I mean, that is a neon sign.
It is a completely unambiguous signal. It says, I'm here and I'm ready. There is absolutely no guesswork involved for the female mandrill.
And the vervet monkey. The source jokes that this monkey should be the official American mascot.
Because of the color scheme?
Yes. A red penis, white pubic hair, and a bright blue scrotum. Red, white, and blue. Nature is literally painting flags on the genitals of these guys. It's patriotic.
It demonstrates perfectly that when nature wants a biological signal to be seen, it has all the tools necessary to make it utterly unmissable. It can use prominent structure, it can use vivid color, it can use exaggerated size.
The source even jokes about a rocket signal. He says, how about when the female gets aroused, a little flag shoots up from her vagina saying, ready, or rockets shoot from her crotch.
It's a completely absurd image, but it really drives the scientific point home. Women have no such signal. There is no flag. There is no neon color change that is visible from a distance.
And it's not just animals doing this. The source talks about how human men have historically tried to mimic this look-at-me biology through culture. We are constantly trying to recreate the mandrill effect artificially.
This is a fascinating cultural layer. We see this all throughout the history of human fashion and tribal dress.
The cod piece. 450 years ago, aristocratic European men were basically wearing highly decorated jockstraps on the outside of their pants just to make their package look bigger and more colorful.
Exactly. Or consider the Hulu warriors mentioned in the text. They actually paint their faces to mimic the exact colors of a primate scrotum. They use yellow on their cheeks, red around their eyes, and paint their beards blue. They are consciously replicating that primal genital display right on their faces to signal dominance and extreme virility to women and rivals.
And the New Guinean chiefs with those penis sheaths that go all the way up to their nipples, the source calls this whole phenomenon a penis parade. Men are just constantly advertising, here I am, pick me, look at the sheer size of this.
And the stark contrast is that women do not provide these kinds of instructional signals.
Right. Now, the source acknowledges that women absolutely have attraction features, breasts, hips, long eyelashes, the sway of their walk, but he makes a very crucial distinction here. Those features are designed to get a man's attention, but they do not tell him how to get them off.
That is the key difference. They are come hither signals, not insert here instructions. They draw the male in, they create the initial attraction, but they purposely do not give him the user manual once he arrives.
He asks this great question. Why do females have so many body parts designed to get men's attention, yet so few to instruct men on what to do next? It seems like a cruel trick. Come over here now, guess what number I'm thinking of.
But this brings us to the major pivot of the deep dive. This is where we move from the comedy of the situation directly into the core biological theory. Because as we established earlier, this isn't an accident. This frustration, this Easter egg hunt, is the entire point.
Which brings us to segment 4, the clitoris principle.
The source argues that this difficulty is a feature of human evolution, not a bug. The hidden nature of the clitoris actually serves a very specific vital function.
And that function is?
To judge the male's ability as a lover.
Whoa. Okay, so it's a test. It's literally a biological vetting mechanism.
Exactly. To understand this, we have to look at the fundamental difference between the penis principle and the clitoris principle. These two principles were based entirely on the economics of human biology.
Let's break that down for the listener. What exactly is the penis principle?
The penis principle is based on the economics of sperm. Sperm is incredibly plentiful. It is very cheap for the body to produce. A healthy human male produces millions of sperm every single day. Therefore, from an evolutionary standpoint, advertising pays off. Being big, noticeable, shouting, "I'm over here!" That works perfectly for the male strategy. You want to cast the widest net possible because you have an abundance of resources to spare.
Okay, I get that. It's quantity over quality in a sense. Spray and pray, biologically speaking.
Roughly, yes. That's the male default. But the clitoris principle is based on the economics of eggs. Eggs are exceedingly rare. A woman releases 1, maybe 2 a month. That is it. And if that one egg gets fertilized, the biological cost to her is astronomical. Pregnancy is a massive, life-altering investment. It's 9 months of taxing gestation, the physical toll on her body, the historical risk of death during childbirth, and then years and years of nursing and child-rearing.
Right, so if she mates with a dud, or a guy who leaves immediately after the act, the cost to her is huge. She can't just brush it off and try again tomorrow like the male can.
Exactly. Indiscriminate mating is incredibly dangerous for a female from an evolutionary perspective. So if the clitoris were easy to find, if it were literal press here for orgasm button on a long stick intercourse, would happen far too easily. It would happen too quickly.
And she wouldn't have the necessary time to actually assess the guy.
Correct. By making the source of her pleasure a complex challenge, by hiding it deep inside, or making it require very specific tactile stimulation, Mother Nature ensures that the female only mates with a male who is attentive enough, patient enough, and skilled enough to actually solve the puzzle.
I really love the way the source puts this. It says, nobody gets inside the palace without ringing the doorbell.
It is the ultimate biological gatekeeper, the sheer difficulty of the task force's interaction. It naturally extends the courtship phase. It physically forces the male to prove he isn't just a hit-and-run artist. He has to stay, he has to focus his attention, and he has to genuinely care about her experience.
So all these men throughout history are complaining about the scavenger hunt, but the scavenger hunt is literally the only reason they're getting quality genes to pass on in the first place.
Exactly. It ensures they are actively proving their worth. It ruthlessly filters out the lazy, the unobservant, and the utterly selfish males from the gene pool.
This leads perfectly into segment 5, strategic evolution. Because the source outlines 2 very specific evolutionary strategies that this hard-to-get biology directly supports. The first one is called the sexy son hypothesis.
This is a classic foundational concept in evolutionary biology, and it can be a bit counterintuitive at first glance. The basic idea is this. If a woman mates with a man who is clumsy, entirely impatient, and just generally bad at pleasing her,
A guy who definitely cannot find the manhole cover above the Lincoln Tunnel.
right, if she mates with him, she might have a son. And that son will very likely inherit his father's genes, including those clumsy, impatient, selfish traits.
And then that son is going to have a really hard time finding a mate when he grows up.
Exactly. His reproductive success will be incredibly low. Women will reject him, which means the mother's genes stop right there. Her lineage hits a dead end. However, if she forces the male to prove his skill, if she only selects the master of the scavenger hunt, she produces sons who inherit that exact skill.
Oh, wow. And those sexy sons go out into the world, seduce lots of women because they actually know what they're doing, and they pass on grandma's genes far and wide. So by being incredibly picky about her own sexual pleasure today, she is actually investing in the future reproductive success of her male offspring.
Precisely. It's a brilliant multi-generational investment strategy. She isn't just looking for a good time tonight. She is actively selecting for a genetic trait that will ensure her grandchildren exist.
That is just fascinating. It's not just about, hey, I want to feel good right now. It's literally, I want my unborn son to be an absolute heartbreaker.
Well, a pleaser at least, a heart fixer perhaps. But there is a second major strategy at play here, the pair bond strategy.
The source makes a really, really interesting distinction here between the word sex and the word sexuality.
Yes, the quote is, sex serves to make babies, but sexuality serves to raise babies.
That is a quote for the fridge right there. What does that really mean in practice?
It means that the mechanical act of intercourse that briefly creates the zygote, that is, sex, but the incredibly complex dance of sexuality, the foreplay, the lingering mystery, the emotional connection, the tease, that whole apparatus exists to keep the parents together long enough to actually raise the child.
So if it were just bam wham, thank you, ma'am, the male might just leave to find another mate.
Biologically speaking, yes. Once the sperm is deposited, the male's immediate biological imperative is technically fulfilled. He could leave. But human babies are exceptionally helpless for years. They require massive brain development outside the womb. They need two parents to gather resources. So a hard-to-seduce woman physically forces the male to invest. He has to invest his time. He has to invest his labor. He has to show prolonged tenderness.
The source says it tests his willingness to work, and also, surprisingly, his killer instinct.
It's a delicate balance. She wants to see if he has the persistence to stick around and figure it out. A mysterious, complex woman keeps the man engaged. The source argues that a woman who is easily figured out is much less likely to hold man's attention in the long term compared to one who retains some level of biological mystery.
This directly addresses that very common male complaint that women are just being peases. You hear this all the time. Oh, she's just playing hard to get.
Right, but this theory reframes it completely. The tease isn't malice. It's not her being cruel or manipulative. It's a vital evolutionary bonding mechanism. It is the glue. It's the prolonged negotiation phase of the biological contract.
The source actually compares humans to baboons here to show just how unique we are in the animal kingdom.
Right. Baboons do not court each other. They fight. The alpha male violently beats up the other males, and by virtue of simply winning that physical fight, he takes the female. There is no seduction involved whatsoever. He doesn't bring her flowers, he doesn't groom her gently, and he certainly doesn't try to find her G-spot. He just takes what he wants.
But humans are different. We court, we talk, we negotiate.
And that complex negotiation is driven entirely by the female's initial reluctance and the male's driving need to overcome that reluctance through providing pleasure. The hard-to-get biology literally forces the human male to become something other than a violent baboon.
So this hard-to-get biology actually changed the fundamental nature of men, which brings us to segment 6, the evolution of empathy. The source calls this the sissy factor.
The source uses the term sissy, ironically, of course, he's reclaiming the word. But the core argument is that this dynamic female choice based strictly on pleasure and attention fundamentally domesticated the human male.
How so? Like mechanically, how did that happen?
It naturally selected for men who possessed intuition. Men who could read subtle nonverbal signals, men who had a high capacity for empathy. If you were just a brute, like our baboon example, you simply cannot navigate the labyrinth. You physically cannot find the G-spot if you aren't paying close attention to the woman's reactions, her breathing, the subtle shifts in her body language.
So the guys who are just violent thugs basically got weeded out of the gene pool because they couldn't figure out how to please the women, and the women wouldn't mate with them again.
To a large extent, yes. Or at the very least, they were far less reproductively successful than the men who could balance physical strength with emotional sensitivity. Evolution started heavily rewarding the listeners. It rewarded the observers.
The source brings up some truly wild physiological evidence for this domestication. Have you heard of Cuvier syndrome before this?
Yes, sympathetic pregnancy. It is a remarkable and very real medical phenomenon.
It's mind-blowing to me. The source says many human men actually gain weight when their mate is pregnant. Their estrogen levels actually rise. Some men even experience ghost labor pains or full-blown morning sickness.
It beautifully illustrates how deeply bonded the human male is to his mate and his offspring. A male baboon does not get morning sickness. He doesn't care. This physiological link is a direct result of us evolving to be deeply invested partners, not just temporary sperm donors. Our male biology has literally rewired itself to be in sync with the female reproductive experience.
And the source argues this entire shift is a massive victory for female choice. Women chose the guys who were capable of this deep connection.
And looking at the bigger picture of human civilization, the source argues this exact dynamic led to the concept of romantic love. It led to more peaceful societies. It led to dads instead of just deadbeats.
Dads instead of deadbeats. I really like that phrasing.
It's accurate. Crucial to human evolution was women consistently choosing less violent, more maternal males. We so often think of evolution purely as survival of the fittest, meaning the strongest, the biggest, the most aggressive. But here, fittest meant the most attentive, the most empathetic, the best listener.
So we essentially owe romantic poetry, Valentine's Day, and good fathers all to the fact that the clitoris is incredibly hard to find.
You could certainly make a very strong scientific argument for exactly that. If the clitoris were a big red button right on the outside, we might still be out in the savannah acting exactly like baboons.
That is just a staggering thought. Okay, before we wrap up today, we have to touch on segment 7, linguistic mysteries. Because the source takes a little detour into language here that is just too funny and too relevant to skip over.
Ah, the plural problem. This is an absolute gem.
Yes. The source asks a question I have literally never considered in my entire life. Why is there a plural for the word clitoris?
That plural word is clitorides.
Clitorides. It sounds like a Greek tragedy. Coming this fall to a theater near you, the Clitorides. But the source asks this brilliant question. In what possible scenario would someone ever need to address a group of them?
Yeah.
Like, okay, ladies, move those clitorides over this way.
It really highlights the absurdity of the language. It's a word that technically exists in the dictionary, but practically speaking, it never ever gets used in normal human conversation.
The host jokes in the text, if women invented this plural, why don't they ever use it? And if a man invented it, does he give lessons?
It implies a level of casual familiarity or abundance that directly contradicts the hidden, singular, mysterious nature we've been discussing this whole time. It's extreme linguistic optimism.
And speaking of abundance versus scarcity in language, the source brings up a fantastic study by the late George Carlin.
The comedian, he was an amateur anthropologist in his own right, really.
He really was. Carlin did a whole presentation on slang words for masturbation. And the vast linguistic disparity he found perfectly mirrors our entire biological discussion today.
What were the exact numbers he found?
Well, he listed men's slang phrases first. And he just went on for 20 solid minutes. Thousands of phrases. Tricking the chicken, spanking the monkey, flogging the dolphin, you name it, men have invented a phrase for it.
It's a massive display of abundance, a display of high visibility and casualness.
Exactly. It's loud and proud. And then he listed women's slang phrases for the same act. After all that research, he found exactly two. Two. And one of them, and I still can't get over this, one of them was making soup.
Making soup.
What does that even mean? It's so aggressively domestic. It's so vague. Like, is it a slow simmer? Is there chopping involved? I don't understand.
But it perfectly fits the evolutionary pattern we've established. Male sexuality is all about display. It's loud, it's numerous, it's highly visible. Female sexuality, linguistically and biologically, is heavily guarded. It's coy. It is deeply mysterious. It's hidden away in the kitchen, quietly making soup.
It's private. It's perfectly coded. Sorry, I can't come to the phone right now. I'm busy making soup.
Exactly. It requires inside knowledge to even understand what's happening.
So Bringing this all home for you listening, we've gone from the hyena bait penis on the African plains to the hidden underground palace of the clitoris. We've talked about spatial navigation, fluorescent monkeys, and sympathetic male pregnancies.
It has been quite a biological journey.
It really has. And the source wraps up with a little philosophical sting that I think is brilliant. He quotes Friedrich Nietzsche.
For woman, man is the means, the child is the end.
It's a very cynical view of relationships. But the source points out the ultimate historical irony here. Nietzsche, this incredibly high-minded philosopher who wrote extensively about the Superman and mastering one's destiny, likely went completely insane from untreated syphilis.
Which historians agree he almost certainly contracted in a whorehouse.
Right. So here's this brilliant man pursuing sex as a simple means to an end, thinking he is above it all, but ending up utterly destroyed by it. The source asks this brutal question. Why was he in a whorehouse in the first place? Why weren't women paying him?
It brings us right back to the fundamental biological asymmetry of the sexes. Men seek, women choose. Nietzsche, for all his massive intellect, was subject to the exact same biological laws as the rest of us. He was hunting for the prize, completely driven by his biology, and he paid the ultimate price for it.
So to summarize the deep dive today, the scavenger hunt isn't a bug in the system. It's not a mistake. It is a highly sophisticated, millions of years old biological filter.
Correct. The difficulty ensures absolute quality. It ruthlessly tests for commitment, for empathy, and for genetic fitness. That hidden anatomy literally transformed the human male from a violent fighter into a tender lover and a dedicated father.
And it gave us a world where finding the spot is the ultimate test of human character.
It is the complex lock that requires a very, very specific key.
I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over. We spent this whole hour talking about how this struggle, this inherent difficulty, created human empathy. It created our humanity. It made ancient men work for it, which in turn made them care.
Yes. That effort is what is truly transformative.
So what happens to our species in a future where technology just solves the puzzle for us? We have dating apps, we have instant gratification, we have rapidly increasing technology around sex VR, teledildonics, AI companions. If we completely bypass the hunt, if we use technology to make pleasure entirely immediate and effortless, do we lose the very biological mechanism that made men humane in the first place?
That is a profoundly unsettling question. If the work is what creates the bond, what happens when all the work is gone? If we remove the biological filter, do we eventually devolve back to the baboon?
It's definitely something to mull over. Maybe the struggle really is the point. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
See you next time.